minute or two of introductory comments. The Rambam says in Perek Dalet of Hilchas Tefillin, Halacha Chav Hey, Kedushas Tefillin Gedoyla, Kedushas Tefillin, Kedusha Gedoyla Hi, Shekol Zman Shetfillin Al Roisha, as long as a person has tefillin on his head, Al Roisha Shel Adam, Al Zroyai, Hu Onav V'yorei. Tefillin keep a person humble and fearful of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'enai nimshach b'schoik u'b'sicha b'teila. It'll prevent a person from involving himself in what we would call narishkeit. Ve'enai maharer b'machshavos rois, ela mefane liboy l'divrei ha'emes v'hatzedek. Keeps a person's mind in the right places. He continues one halacha later, and he says, "V'kol she'enei meniach tefillin." Somebody who is not wearing tefillin, or does not wear tefillin, over b'shmoina esei, he's mevatel 8 mitzvahs asei. V'kol harogil b'tefillin marich yomin. The Rambam then says regarding Mezuzah in Perek Vav Halacha Yud Gimel, Chayev Adam Lizar b'Mezuzah, Mipnei sheyichayvas hakol tamid. It's a constant chiyuv Mezuzah. V'kol eish sheyikones v'yetzei yipoga b'yichud shmoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every time a person enters a room or leaves, he bumps into HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'yizkar ha'avosai v'yer mishnasai. He'll remember Hashem's love and he'll wake up from his sleep. V'shigiyosai v'hevlei hazman, and all the narishkeit that a person is involved with. V'yeda she'en sham davar ha'imid la'olam u'l'ol me'elamim ele yediyas tzur ha'olam u'miyad chayzer l'daitai v'haylech b'darkei misharm. So a person could be, his mind could be in the most favorfina places, but he'll bump into the mezuzah u'miyad chayzer l'daitai. He'll snap back into himself. So there's more from the Rambam regarding tefillin, mezuzah, and sifrei Torah, but the idea is that these are mitzvahs. Mezuzah is constant every moment of every day. Tefillin is almost every day. Sefer Torah also is Reuvain of the year, where about half of the year we hear Kriyas HaTorah. These are mitzvahs that we're involved with at all times. Negillas, and there are many, many aspects involved. There's the klaf, there's the writing, there's the checking, there's computer checking. There are myriad different areas and subcategories of STAM, and therefore it's worthwhile, since the Rambam says terrible things about one who's mevatel these mitzvahs, and being mevatel the mitzvah could be a person puts on tefillin every day, but the tefillin he's wearing are not kosher, or the tefillin he's wearing are not in the right place. The mezuzah he has on his door his whole life is not kosher, so that's considered as though he was mevatel the mitzvah. And the Rambam says terrible things about such a situation. Therefore, it's worthwhile that we learn something and understand something about these topics so that we can hopefully, Be'ezer Hashem, be mekayim these mitzvahs in the best possible way. I'm happy to try and attempt to answer any question. If I know the answer, I'll tell you the answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. And feel free. Yeah?
I have a merpeset balcony. She only has one door going out from the salon. Which side should the mezuzah be on?
Question is a very important question that's negayah to almost every apartment in Eretz Yisrael, and that is, what is the halacha of a mezuzah on a balcony? And the answer to the question is that there are many different factors that are involved. The case that you mentioned is that the merpeset involved one cannot get to from the Rishus HaRabim. For instance, it's on the second or third floor, whatever it may be. Some people are on Komak Nisa, and one can get into their garden or merpeset from the Rishus HaRabim. So that would be one variable. So we're talking about a case where there's no entrance from the Rishus HaRabim. The second question that one would have to know is the size of the merpeset. The size of the merpeset, whether we're dealing with a small merpeset, which is less than Dalet al Dalet Amis, or whether we're dealing with a larger merpeset, which is greater than Dalet al Dalet Amis. Many merpesot in this country are in between, which means that they're less than Dalet Amis in one direction, but more than Dalet Amis in another direction. So that would, and which would add to a total of more than Dalet al Dalet. So that would also involve a machlekes. So I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're talking about a standard merpeset, which is probably the Reuvain, where it's a regular merpeset that's more than dalit al dalit. And in such an instance, there's a machlekes haposkim where the mezuzah is meant to be placed. Rav Moshe Feinstein and many poskim in Yerushalayim are of the opinion that we view a merpeset as another room in the home. And therefore, even though a merpeset doesn't meet the requirements that the Rambam delineates for chiyuv mezuzah, namely doesn't have a ceiling, which is problematic, and generally speaking it's outdoors. However, since it's mukaf with mechitzis, it's surrounded by four walls, and its general function, these poskim assume is as part of the home. When you've gone out to your merpeset, you haven't left your home. You've gone to a different room, a more casual style room in your home. So therefore they hold that it has a din of a regular room in the home, and the mezuzah would be placed on the right side going out to the merpeset. Other poskim, namely the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Yashiv, and others, disagree. And they say, no, when you go out to your merpeset, you've left your house. And when you're coming back into your house from your merpeset, so now you need a mezuzah. In other words, when you've left your house, you don't need a mezuzah on the right side when you leave anywhere. So when I'm going out to my merpeset, I'm leaving my house. So I don't need a mezuzah to leave my house. But now I'm on the merpeset. And once I'm on the merpeset, I'm coming back into my house. So I'm going to need a mezuzah on the right side coming into the house. So that would be the machlekes, which is, there are many poskim on many sides of the equation, and there are many variables, some of which we delineated, but there are many others which could change the din, and therefore any such case should be discussed with a competent halachic authority, and all the information, the pertinent information should be given so that a correct and proper answer can be provided.
How often do you have to check your tefillin and mezuzahs nowadays?
How often do you have to check tefillin and mezuzahs nowadays? That's a controversial topic. We'll start with mezuzahs because it's perhaps somewhat easier. Mezuzahs is mefurish in the poskim, mefurish in the Gemara, that a mezuzah should be checked twice in 7 years. Pamayim b'shavua. Pamayim b'shavua, most poskim understand to mean twice in 7 years. And again, most poskim understand twice in 7 years to mean approximately once every 3.5 years. There's a minig in Frankfurt. Others bring this minig to check it every Adar Sheni. So that's like a simon. Comes out to Be'erich every 7 years. Twice in 7 years. That's okay. That's an established minig. However, there are those that say that bismanenu the halacha is different, and their reasoning is because when one of the reasons that's given, Rashi says that one of the reasons is because we suspect that perhaps that the mezuzah will rat, and it could become moldy, and that could happen based on the weather. There could be leakage, moisture, etc. Therefore, we're nervous that the mezuzah is not going to maintain its kosher status, and it has to be checked twice in 7 years. There are those that maintain that bismanenu, this doesn't apply, since we have insulated homes, and these chashas don't apply anymore. They would agree that on an outdoor mezuzah, like on a porch or a front door, if you're exposed to, depends on what type of building you live in, so such mezuzahs they would agree maintain the ikar halacha.
With the hermetic.
Even without the hermetic case. Oh, you're talking about the outdoor ones?
Yeah.
The outdoor ones can get ruined even with the hermetic case.
They're also plastic. The clock itself is wrapped in plastic.
Right, that's another factor. What you're saying regarding the outdoor one doesn't help. Trust me, doesn't help.
What doesn't help?
We'll get one step at a time. We'll come back to it. One second. So that's regarding mezuzahs. Again, we're going to come back. We'll discuss this more in a second. But regarding the short answer is regarding mezuzahs that the ikar halacha is it has to be checked twice in 7 years. There are poskim that say that bismanenu would be different. We'll come back to it in a moment.
What would the difference be?
We'll come back to it in a moment. Regarding tefillin, the Shulchan Aruch clearly says that tefillin that are hofseku b'kashrus, the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Lametes says that tefillin should hofseku b'kashrus einon tzrichen b'dika la'olam. They never have to be checked. assuming that they're worn regularly. Tefillin that are not worn regularly, the Shulchan Aruch says, should be checked. So that's the Iker Halacha regarding mezuzahs, and that's the Iker Halacha regarding tefillin. Now,
About what you just said, is there a difference between someone who has the batim that are gasa and the batim shutim?
now, there are those that say that that bismanenu, that both the tefillin and the mezuzahs don't have to be checked at all because there are no chashas. We have tefillin gasais and memela there's no chash whatsoever. Even though the Shulchan Aruch said there's no chash, but we'll explain in a moment. And mezuzahs also memela you don't have to check anything. The mitzias is that it's not necessarily so. Apparently, in the time of the Shulchan Aruch, the ink that they used was a quality of ink or made of materials which lasted la'olam. Indeed, the Rambam says that if you use the ink that the Rambam uses, so it's miskayim la'alfei shonim, I think is the lashon of the Rambam in the Tshuva. Indeed, they find all these old ksavim from 1,000 and 2,000 years ago. I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are over 2,000 years old and they're totally black. The reason is because the ink that's used in these types of things is the Rambam's ink, which is made from carbon, and carbon doesn't fade, stays black forever. However, the ink that's been used for the last couple of hundred years is not made from carbon, it's made from other ingredients, and the mitzias is that it does fade. Any pair of tefillin or mezuzah that one opens up, if you would open up a pair of tefillin or a mezuzah today that was written 100 years ago, 99.9% of them will have faded to the point where they're no longer kosher. Therefore, that means that sometime between now and 100 years ago, at some point it became not kosher. Which means that there, even if the chash of becoming moldy that the Gemara is discussing is not applicable anymore, however, these other chashas of fading and cracking letters, when you have to put the tefillin shel roish into the batim, they have to be folded. The mitzias is that very often, when the parashiyos are folded and they're stuffed into the batim, the letters can crack, sometimes right away, sometimes over time. So there are other chashas that are involved, namely, like we said, fading of the ink and cracking of the letters. And this is not something that I made up. The Paiskim for a couple hundred years already have been talking about this. The Tshuva Me'ava mentions this, the Melech Shamayim mentions it, and many others. The Aruch HaShulchan therefore says that the halacha is not like what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Although in Shulchan Aruch it says Tefillin she'uchsaku b'kashrus ein tzrichen b'dika la'olam, the Aruch HaShulchan says bismanenu it's different. It's worse because our ink fades. And therefore the Aruch HaShulchan so now the next question would be how often should they be checked? The Aruch HaShulchan says a very logical thing, not that he needs my haskama, he says they should be checked be'ezes man, which I would translate in English as meaning once in a while. Just check them once in a while, face, once every 10 years, something like that, just to make sure that the letters haven't faded, that the letters haven't cracked, and the same would apply for a mezuzah. Now, even according to these paiskim who said that l'chayre bismanenu there should be no need to check a mezuzah because there's no chash of it getting moldy, and memela you don't have to check it twice in 7 years. Even if Naniach will say that that's so, but l'chayra, since we have these other issues of cracking letters and faded letters, which anybody who checks tefillin and mezuzahs can tell you that these chashas are very much still relative today. Therefore, mezuzahs also, at the very least, should be checked be'ezes man, possibly twice in 7 years, like the Iker Halacha. But even according to those that say that it shouldn't be that way because of today's properly insulated homes, but they should be checked, at least we would say be'ezes man, which means once in a while. Yeah.
Practically, what would be the difference between mirpeset mezuzah and indoor mezuzah?
The reason why a mirpeset mezuzah would be different than an indoor mezuzah is because when it's exposed to the elements, so cold or heat, sun, there's somebody on Nachal Yarkon whose porch is exposed to direct sunlight, and he had his mezuzah on his porch in a metal case, and when I unscrewed the bottom of the case, ash started coming out of the case. There was no zeicher that there was ever a mezuzah there.
So I'm saying practically how often should one check it out?
So outdoor mezuzahs need to. So there are those that say Aruch HaShulchan, I think himself says outdoor mezuzahs should be checked once a year.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you have to. It depends on the matzah. If a person lives in a home with direct sunlight on his mezuzah case, then ain't a chanami. Perhaps he should check it once a year. Yeah,
the
Nefesh,
Mezuzahs
Nafsham.
whenever I check Mezuzahs, the ones in the Merpeset, they do the worst.
Yeah. I'm saying the Metzias is when you open up such mezuzahs, even the plastic that they're wrapped in also crumbles in your hands. Sometimes the mezuzah itself crumbles. The letters often crumble. Also, sometimes the rain can get in, so the combination of the rain and the sun can destroy this. If it's exposed to the elements, there's a tremendous danger. Yeah. Sam Sofer says, and the Piskei Tshuva brings it, that be'etzem anybody could check it themselves. But experience has shown that generally people don't, even on such things, people are not necessarily sensitive to the changes in color. For instance, the letter has to be black, right? So when we're discussing faded letters, so sometimes it could fade to a reddish tint, like a rust color. Sometimes it could fade to a more transparent color, like a gray. And somebody who's not experienced in these types of things often will miss these nuances of the slight change in color, or very often it's like reading an x-ray, you know, that you look at an x-ray, you say, I don't see any fractured bone, but then the guy shows you the fracture, so then you say, oh yeah, I didn't notice that. So it's the same thing over here. Somebody who does this all the time will often notice a fracture in a letter or a fading of a color that a regular person himself might not necessarily notice. So technically, yes, one could check them themselves, but it's usually not a good idea. Sefer Torah don't fade as quickly as tefillin and mezuzahs for two reasons. First of all, they're constantly used and they're constantly getting aired out, and that's healthy for the Sefer Torah. Second of all, Sefer Torah generally are larger, and because they're larger, there's more ink there, and when there's more ink there, generally, that will cause it to last longer. It's like anything else. In other words, the more mass that there is, the longer it'll take for that mass to either disappear or disintegrate or change color or whatever it may be. Sometimes you have a Sefer Torah that's written in a very thin handwriting, so then in a chanami. Then sometimes even when they're written, they're not as black as they should be. But hakol fi Iyun, depends.
Is there no way to protect the outdoor Mezuzah then?
The best way to protect an outdoor mezuzah is to keep it in a white plastic case, wrapped in white paper.
Like wax paper?
Not wax paper, white paper, like this. Regular piece of paper, you take a white piece of paper, first you wrap it in plastic, then you wrap it in a white piece of paper, then you put it in a white plastic case or a wooden case, which wouldn't help for the rain, but it would help a little bit for the sun, and those are your best odds.
The white rejects the heat, right?
Right, yes. White reflects the heat as opposed to black, which absorbs it, and metal certainly conducts it. Metal's the worst. Yes, parents.
I take my outdoor mezuzah and I open it and I see the plastic is intact and I don't see any sign of deterioration. Is that
No,
not to
because
say
again,
that it doesn't look like, so it looks like moisture didn't go in, it wasn't affected by the sun.
even so, the letters themselves could fade. The color could fade.
So it's not,
It's not a raya. It's not a raya. Yeah. Question is about ritzuas that are black on both sides. Is one meant to pursue such ritzuas or not? There are two schools of thought on this matter. Before we come to the two schools of thought, let's first discuss what exactly is going on over here. There's halacha.
You asked another question about Mezuzah before.
Okay, stay there. We'll hold the thought. Yeah, go ahead.
How come they're using a different ink today if it's known that it lasts less time?
Thank you.
How come they're using a different ink today if the Rambam's ink lasted for thousands of years? The
why don't we
answer
use
is
that?
that the Chidah says, and the Mishnah Berurah brings it, that somehow we've lost the chachma of how to make this ink. The Rambam knew how to do it, and even though he gives detailed instructions of how to make it, it just doesn't work for us. So much so that today, in the year 2017, there are still people working diligently on creating the Rambam's ink, and thus far have been largely unsuccessful. In the last mamish year or two, they're starting to have a little bit more hatzlacha, but it doesn't work out for a variety of reasons. Coming back to your question about the ritzuas. So there's a halacha that tefillin have to have ritzuas. The ritzuas are meant to bind the tefillin on our arms and on our heads. The halacha is that the ritzuas should be black. It's halacha l'moshe misinai that the ritzuas have to be black. The Rambam says, now, if ritzuas have to be black, so all that means is that the front has to be black. The Gemara explicitly speaks about the front of the ritzua being black, and it's clear from Rashi in the Gemara in Menachos, I think it's Daf Lamed Hey or Lamed Vav, it's very clear that the back of the ritzua could have been any color. The Rambam says that it's noi for tefillin, it's nice for tefillin, if the back of the ritzua is the same color as the batim. So the Rambam Lashitase, the Rambam holds that the batim don't have to be black. The Rambam holds that the tefillin could be green. So let's say you want to have green tefillin, so you'll make the back of your ritzuas green. The Rambam says it's noi tefillin. It's noi tefillin. It's a form of zakeli vanveyu. If the back of the ritzua is the same color as the boxes of the tefillin. Now today we're noying to make the tefillin boxes black for various reasons. Therefore, it would come out that according to the Rambam, it's noi tefillin if the back of the ritzua is black. That said, all the Rishonim and all the Achronim, no exceptions, reject the opinion of the Rambam. And they say that ein anu noyegin kain. We do not have this minig of making the back of the ritzuas black. This is brought already Rishonim that lived 1 or 2 days after the Rambam, straight through to the Ramah and the Beis Yosef and all the Achronim down to the Aruch HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah. So the Rambam is out. There's no reason to make the back of the ritzua black because of the Rambam. So why would one want to make the back of the ritzua black? The answer is as follows. Because we said a moment ago that the front of the ritzua has to be black, and that's halacha l'moshe misinai. The Mishnah Berurah wonders how much has to be black. Because let's say I have a beautiful black ritzua with a white speck. The paint has come off in one spot. So am I now not yotzei mitzvahs tefillin? What's the gvul, right? I tell a painter, paint my room blue, right? So at what point has he gone against my will? How much of the room is it Reuvain? What if 60% of the room is blue and 40% is white? So you could say I painted the room blue, right? It's the same thing with the ritzua. Maybe we'll say if 60% of the ritzua is black, so you mekayem the mitzvah. Maybe no, maybe it's more than that. Mishnah Berurah is not sure about this. At the end of that Mishnah Berurah, he comes out with the tzorech Iyun. He's not sure. So therefore, it comes out, according to the Mishnah Berurah, that if somebody has a white spot that one can see with his eyes from about this far away on his ritzuas, there's a possibility that he has not been yotzei mitzvahs tefillin. He made a bracha levatol. He has to put on tefillin again. He's mesupik about it. So this makes people very nervous, and rightfully so. So therefore, they came up with an ingenious idea. Instead of painting the face of the ritzua black, what we can do is we can dunk the hide of the animal. We can dunk it into a vat of black paint or ink, and then it will absorb through and through the entire piece of leather. So when I now cut the ritzuas, and I have my ritzuas, these ritzuas that are black on both sides, it doesn't mean that they painted the front back black and they painted the back black as well. That's not what happened. These ritzuas are absorbed fully 100% black. What that achieves is that now one can never come to this suffix of the Mishnah Berurah. You'll never have a white spot on your ritzua, because even if the shiny paint on the front peels off, the ritzua is still going to be black, because the whole thing is black. It's like a chocolate cake. You cut a piece of chocolate cake, what's behind it, they're all makel to one degree or another. Some have an idea of rubai kakulai, some have an idea of Ayman Merubal Aparetz, which is a whole discussion unto itself how that works. Some want to say the ritzua only has to be, let's say, approximately this long, right? So anything beyond the shear wouldn't have to be black. Others hold that opinion. Mishnah Berurah discusses all these opinions and rejects them. But the other Achronim that discuss the Shaila many of them do subscribe to these ideas. Therefore, that's A. B, it's not a technological advance to dunk in a hide into black dye and have the whole thing absorb black. What I mean to say is as follows. The Vilna Gaon lived 250 years ago. Okay? If the Vilna Gaon would have had the ability to computer check his tefillin, would he have done so? Certainly. There's no question about it. Why didn't he do it? Because they didn't have computers. So the technological advance of computer checking STAM is what didn't allow the Vilna Gaon to do what he didn't do, right? But had he been able to, he would have done it. Making a Ritzuah black through and through is not, it's not like Louis Pasteur came along and discovered this idea that we can make Ritzuahs black. This is something that could have been done 2,000 years ago also. And we never found until approximately the year 2000 that somebody came up with the idea to do that. So therefore the Paiskim say, listen, it's not my business why Rashi and the Ramban and the Ramah and the Vilna Gaon all didn't do this. But if it's such a great idea, somebody somewhere along the line would have done it. And the Mishnah Berurah himself discusses the problem of Ritzuah's fading, the color fading in the Makom HaHiduk where you tie the tefillin. So therefore, Chadash Azim and Atayra, we don't do new things, especially when these new things are something that could have been done in the past and wasn't done. So therefore, there are those that are very much against this. And Ein Hanami, they say, person should check his Ritzuahs once a week, once a month, whatever, every Rosh Chodesh, whatever. Take a look at your Ritzuahs, make sure that there are no white spots. If there are, you take one of those pens or brushes, you say L'Shem Kedushas Tefillin, and you paint it over, and that's it, and then you're okay. So I can't tell anybody what to do, but those are the two schools of thought, and one should again consult his Torah halachic authority to determine the course of action that he would want to take on his own.
The tefillin is black. There's something white on the tefillin. Stop.
Generally speaking, that's not a problem. If it's, usually if it comes off with your finger, it's certainly not a problem. Again, you said if it's on the tefillin, the Ritzuah is much more chamor than the batin. So on the Ritzuah, yes, you can it's like an esrog, you take like a toothpick and you just take it off. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question about purchasing mezuzot and tefillin. So when you go anywhere and you want to make a purchase, so for example, I've heard mezuzot that could be as little as say $35, and they can go up to well over $100. So how does a person know at what level to purchase, and what's more important, what's more kedai to invest your money in, what's less kedai? There's so many different factors involved. I'm mentioning those two in less Sefer Torah because there's less people that are running around trying to buy a Sefer Torah today. I know that's not an easy question.
It's a loaded question, that's for sure. Try and give the short answer.
Okay.
Generally speaking, everything in life that we want to buy, we can determine its quality or its lack of quality based on price. There's a Coca-Cola, a can of Coca-Cola is going to cost you 7 shekel. A can of Pepsi, I like Coke better than Pepsi. A can of Pepsi is going to cost you 5 shekel. A can of RC is going to cost you 3 shekel. Right? It's the same thing when you go shopping for couches. The same thing when you go shopping for suits. The same thing when you go shopping for cars. There are going to be hadragot of prices. Generally speaking, certainly with exceptions, but as a general rule, in everything in life, the least expensive things are not very good. The medium price things are okay. And the more expensive things, generally, certainly with exceptions, but very broadly speaking, the more expensive something is, the better it is. STAM is no different. It's the same exact thing. If you walk into a store and they have a pair of tefillin that they're selling for 1,200 shekel, and they have a pair of tefillin that they're selling for 2,400 shekel, they have a pair of tefillin that's selling for 3,600 shekel, and a pair of tefillin that's selling for 4,800 shekel, and they tell you that the 1,200 shekel tefillin is kosher l'mahadrin min mahadrin, right? So that's very difficult to absorb such information of how one can claim that the least expensive item is totally muhudar, and the more expensive item is also totally muhudar, right? Now, as generally speaking, if there are differences in the pricing, there are very good reasons for those differences. Parenthetically, even though you didn't ask, but it's important to mention that the same applies with regard to hechsherim in all areas, but also in STAM. It's not politics, generally, when one hechsher's product costs double the amount of another hechsher's product. Usually the reason is because the more expensive hechsher demands more from the proprietor, and therefore, in order to accommodate those demands, so the product is going to cost more. If the product has a hechsher and it costs half the amount of another hechsher, generally speaking, it's because the Rav or body organization that's giving the hashgacha is not really demanding all that much. Therefore, the person can produce the product without having to worry about all these demands that the hechsher is placing on him. So,
We're in an era where economic rules also go like demand. If people have the impression that something is better, they can charge more for
it's
it.
100% true.
Even without.
It's 100% true. That's why I prefaced my remarks by saying that I'm speaking in very broad, general strokes, but the fact of the matter is that this is the truth. This is, whether one can debate the subject on a theoretical level or not is not the issue right now. Right now, currently, as of today, in the market of what's going on, this is the mitzias today. The STAM that's being sold for the least amount of money, by and large, is either, not comfortable to say it, but either not kosher at all, or kosher on a very, very b'diavad level. And as the prices go up, very generally, broadly speaking, the quality of the items get a little bit better. Now that's not really, that's just one very tiny aspect. There are 100 other things that come into play, and one has to know what it is he's looking for. Just like when somebody's buying a car or a couch, so they'll speak to people, right? The more, generally speaking, the more expensive of an item a person is going to buy, the more research he's going to do before he buys the product. Therefore, somebody would stand to reason that somebody who's about to spend $1,000 or $1,500 on a pair of tefillin would do a little bit of research before he goes ahead and purchases the product. Same thing for mezuzahs. A person's moving into an apartment. He's going to have to buy 10 mezuzahs, let's say. One person is asking $100 for a mezuzah, so it's a $1,000 purchase, and another meicher is asking for $50 a mezuzah. So again, it would stand to reason that the person would make some birurim to try and understand what the reason for the differences between the items are. It's too great of a subject to give a detailed answer to your question, but that's just a very, very, it's addressing only the smallest aspect of the question, and that is that, generally speaking, the least expensive thing is something you would want to stay away from. Yes?
That begs the question is, how do you do birurim?
How do you do birurim? So there have been some books that have been written recently that try to help people understand exactly what there is to know. But in Hanami, there are very many things to know. But generally speaking, by speaking to local rabbanim who are familiar with the people that are selling the products, so speaking with people who are in the field. So it's the same thing like matzahs, right? If somebody wants to know about where can I get the best matzahs, he'll go to a person who's oisik in matzahs, and generally that person will have an idea of what's going on, right?
If he's not nogea personally in the financial end of it.
In a Hanami, 100%, yeah. But there are always people, there are guys, everybody knows there are guys that know Erevin. There are guys that know Daled Minim, even if they're not a meicher. So again, the best one would be advised to seek out either rabbanim or people who are knowledgeable about the general topic and just see which direction he gets led into. Yes?
You're talking about the front of the tefillin have to be black. What's the idea of the black stripes on a talus?
The idea of the black straps on the talus is a subject that is discussed, and I do remember having seen it discussed. I do not recall right now, especially since I'm being put on the spot and it's not my subject really. So therefore my mind is blanking out, but there definitely is discussion about it, and Lee Nether, if you remind me, I can check it out for you. You wanted something? No? Yeah.
When you're changing a mezuzah for any reason, tell them about bracha. Is it going from checking it, just checking it, or somebody finds a psul and to change it, or going from diavad to a lachatchila or a different word? Is it all one thing?
The question is, when changing a mezuzah, does one have to make a bracha? And as the questioner pointed out, there are many different variations of this question. It can be that somebody has their mezuzahs checked, and they're putting the mezuzahs back up after the mezuzahs have been checked. It could be that the person is upgrading his mezuzahs, or it could be that the person did shiputzim. There are various such instances. Like most things, there's a big machlekes about it. We'll take the most standard case first, and that is somebody who's had the mezuzahs checked. So somebody who's had the mezuzahs checked, the poskim generally say that if the mezuzahs are being put back up on the same day, then one would not make a new bracha when the mezuzahs are put back up, because there's no hesach hadas. What's mechayev the bracha by tzitzis also is when there's a hesach hadas. One has removed the item, one has made a hesach hadas, and then one is either by tzitzis he's putting the tzitzis back on, or by mezuzahs he's putting the mezuzah back on. So poskim generally assume that a mezuzah that's put back on the same day, there's no hesach hadas. However, it's important to keep in mind, and this almost every sefer that talks about this misses this point, which is crucial, and that is that there are other variables. What I mean to say is as follows. Let's say I'm checking the mezuzahs in my house, and I take down the mezuzah from my front door, and I have it checked, and I get it back the same day, and now I'm putting it back up. So einachanami, right? According to standard, generally accepted psak halacha is that one would not make a bracha. However, let's say a person has 10 mezuzahs, and he gives them all in to be checked, and he gets them back. So he doesn't know which one was on his front door, and which one was on a different door, and now the rules of statistics would tell us that the great odds tell us that each mezuzah is not being put back in the place where it was before. So, putting on the side for a moment the fact that that itself might be a halachic shaila, could be that there is a very strong reason to keep track of each mezuzah and know where it came from in order to put it back into the same place to avoid a separate problem of hirada v'kedusha, which is a separate discussion. But regarding this question, the very fact that it's being placed on a different doorway, according to many poskim, would be mechayev in a bracha. So now already you're dealing with two tzdadim to make a bracha. Number one, there are those that say that even if it's put back on the same day, it would require a bracha. And there are those that say that if you switch mezuzah, let's say you have two bedrooms, the boys' room and the girls' room, and for whatever reason you want to switch the mezuzah from the boys' room to the girls' room to the boys' room. So there are poskim that say that one would have to make a bracha in such a situation as well. So therefore, a person now has two tzdadim to make the bracha. Sometimes a person will take a nap in the middle of the afternoon. There are poskim that say that if a person takes a nap in the middle of the afternoon, that itself is a hesach hadas. So there are many, many different variables. It's not so pashut at all that when re-affixing the mezuzahs, one wouldn't make a bracha. Additionally, another case that you mentioned is where when the guy was checking the mezuzah, he found a psul. Now, 95% of the time, he'll find something that's a suffix psul, missing a kutza shel yud. So we paskin that it's a psul, but there's what to be saimach on that it's not a psul. There's a tag on a letter that became detached. The Ramami Panei holds it's a psul, others hold it's not a psul. There's a levush esradi, out of frame, it's all tumulus. There's always going to be a million things in the mezuzah that the magia could find and fix, which is a suffix tikkun. Now, one thing is for sure: if the mezuzah was puzzle and now it's been fixed, so certainly you have to make a bracha when you're putting it back up on the wall. So therefore, it's very unclear, generally speaking, the idea of making brachas when putting a mezuzah back up after it's been checked. And one should consult a qualified halachic authority to determine what he should do in his case. But one thing is for sure: if he puts up a new one, he has one on the door and he buys a new one and he just switches them. Reuvain poskim hold that in such a case one would make a bracha. However, the miyut includes people like Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Yashiv. So, it's not. The miyut might be, It's not clear at all. I'm sorry.
Says it's diavad. You want to do a lechatchila.
So also it would be the same shaila. According to Rabbi Yashiv and Ramosha, one would not make a bracha when switching the mezuzah. According to what we'll call Reuvain, one would make a bracha, and one has to ask his own Rav.
When you're getting a check, you have your spare and you put it in the meantime.
Also,
That's
same
also
shaila. Same shaila, yeah.
Would that be one bracha per room if they all get mixed up? If you've got the 10 rooms and they all got mixed up?
So anytime you have a situation where you have multiple mezuzahs to be affixed, so one would make one bracha before putting up the first one, and then he should put up all the other ones without, I'm not saying he can't talk at all, but he shouldn't get involved with other things in the interim. He should make the bracha, put up the first one, and immediately put up all the rest. One thing that's very, very important, which not a lot of people don't necessarily recognize, and that is that there are many mezuzahs within a home, many doorways that are a suffix, if it's chayev or not, or it's a machlokes.
Right.
So when putting up that first mezuzah upon which one is making the bracha, one should make sure that that's a place that's chayev, for sure. And then he can go ahead and put up all the others. But what would make it chayev for sure? The easiest thing, just to avoid all lumdus, the easiest thing is to use a bedroom usually. Not the parents' bedroom, but one of the kids' bedrooms. A bedroom is almost always dalet al dalet. It has a floor, it has a ceiling, it has a door. It meets all the qualifications. It doesn't have any chesroinus, and therefore a bedroom, a children's bedroom or a guest bedroom is usually the best thing to start with. Not necessarily the front door, because sometimes the front door leads into a hallway or an anteroom, especially in Chutz La'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, at least where I come from, almost every single house in New York, you walk into the house and you're in a little room that's less than dalet al dalet. So that, even if lahalacha will paskin that you could make a bracha on the front door, it's certainly a shaila. So it's best not to start with such a room, and therefore a front door, over here in Eretz Yisrael, a front door usually is okay. But again, to avoid any stakes, a children's bedroom is usually the best place to start. Yeah.
Putting mezuzah at night. Is there a lot about sofer going to the mikvah before he writes? And somebody gets a caravan and a plot of land and not living there yet, they're fixing their house and mezuzahs.
3 questions. First question was, is there any issue about putting up a mezuzah at night? It's no problem at all. One can put up a mezuzah at night, and if there's a chiyuv that's chal on him, he should put up the mezuzah at night. As soon as the chiyuv,
He shouldn't sleep there otherwise.
he shouldn't sleep there. There's a whole
he should do
shaila.
it
If the
quickly.
mezuzah falls down on Shabbos, the Pri Megadim, Avnei Nezer, he should put it up, 100%. The second question was the mikvah. Regarding going to the mikvah, there's no halacha that says that a sofer has to go to the mikvah. It doesn't exist. There is an inyan for a sofer to go to a mikvah. Chassidim go daily. Litvish Sofrim generally go when they need to go, and that's generally the minig. But as far as halacha, there's no halacha. If one has written an entire Sefer Torah, 400 mezuzahs and 60 pairs of tefillin without having gone to the mikveh, everything's 100% kosher. Third question is, if one has purchased a home, we'll call it, and he hasn't yet moved in, is he chayev in mezuzah? The answer to that question is that there's discussion about this in the Achreinim, at what point a person has to put up a mezuzah. It's clear that a mezuzah is a chayvas hadar. Somebody who doesn't live somewhere. I buy an apartment in Florida, and I have no intention of ever moving in there. I just bought it because I have nothing to do with my money, so I'm buying an apartment in Florida. I'm not renting it out, I'm not living there, nothing. So there's no chiyuv mezuzah at all. A chiyuv mezuzah is a chayvas hadar. Person living in the apartment, whether he's the tenant or the owner, it's the person who's living in the apartment who's required to affix the mezuzah. Now, the question becomes, what if I buy a home or an apartment or whatever it may be, and I haven't moved in yet, but I'm gonna move in? So that's a very, very big discussion, and there are stages. Stage number 1 is where I bought it and there's nothing there, and I'm gonna move there. In such a situation, one certainly would not put up a mezuzah halacha l'maisa. In Lamdus, there's discussion about it. Not for now. But l'maisa, certainly one would not put up a mezuzah. Then there's stage 2.
Doesn't matter Florida or Israel.
Doesn't matter. Stage 2 is once one has started moving his stuff in. Okay, in other words, I'm taking possession of the apartment August 1st, and I'm going to be moving in August 15th. So between August 1st and August 15th, I have the refrigerator delivered, I have the oven delivered, I have the couches delivered, and things every day, things are coming. So would that be Mechayev 1 in a Mezuzah? So some say yes, because if I have a storage room, my storage room needs a Mezuzah, so now I have a glorified storage room. It's got my refrigerator there, it's got my oven there, so I have to put a Mezuzah there. Others say, specifically Rabbi Yashiv, he says that's not correct. He says because a storage room means that it's a place where I store my Pesach stuff, for instance, and I take it out when I need it. I keep my Sukkot boards there and I take it out when I need it. I have my toolbox there. When I need it, I go, I take it out. So a storage room, by definition, has things going in and things going out. But between August 1st and August 15th, nothing's coming out. Things are only going in. Refrigerator's going in, the oven's going in, the couches are going in, the dining room table's going in, the beds are going in, everything's going in, nothing's coming out. So Rabbi Yashiv says it's not a storage room. That's a house that you're not yet living in. A house that you're not yet living in is potter, because it's a chayvus hador. So therefore, this is a machlekes. So again, I think the minig, it seems to me that the minig is like Rabbi Yashiv. It's also very negay by chassan and kala. They're going to be moving in the day after the chasana, and the week before they already start moving their stuff in. It's negay to anybody basically who's moving. Very often they'll have stuff going in before they actually move in. But Nizim Kirelitz and others are of the opinion that they can already put up the mezuzah a few days before they come. And Rabbi Yashiv says no, better to wait until the day that you're actually moving in and then put up the mezuzah. It seems to me that the Olam is not more like Rabbi Yashiv, but again, one can seek advice from his personal Rav and to determine what he should do. I see that I'm 5 minutes overtime. I apologize.
Go ahead.